Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. And a super busy week it has been. Butler, Pennsylvania revisited. I regard the response as totally inadequate. The big headline this past week was that the Secret Service suspended without pay 6 agents for the security failures that resulted in the near assassination of President Trump. All Americans know that a bullet narrowly missed him, catching his earlobe. Sadly, a man there with his family was killed and 2 others seriously injured. Speaking from private industry, the discipline, if you can call it that, should have been within 10 days, not a year later. The private sector response would have been a host of terminations. In this case, suspensions without pay were for 10 to 42 days. I didn't hear of any terminations. Now, reportedly, on the return, they were placed in restricted duty roles with less operational responsibility. I regard this as meaningless. The Deputy Director of Secret Service saying the agency takes responsibility for the failure in Butler is also meaningless to me. And the family of the deceased and wounded, I saw a report that Joe Biden giving a speech about the same time was getting more protection than the former president, who was also the leading candidate to be reelected president. More details have been coming out of Washington. The credible threat assessments for the Butler speech were available at least 10 days in advance. This was from a Government Accountability Office report released by Senator Chuck Grassley. No effort was made by the Secret Service to update the local police and to increase security on or move that rally indoors. The shooter was visible on the roof. In fact, I recently saw a video of him moving into that position on the roof. Worse, a pair of local police were aware of him but lacked the means or authority to pursue him. Frankly, this sounds like a continuation of the attack by the Washington deep state going back all the way to 2015. Trump is not one of the inner circle, and the power brokers are deliberately attempting to block Trump, and it goes from the Russia hoax to insufficient security. Remember, there was a second attempt to take Trump out at a golf course. This is anti-American conduct at its worst. It needs to be dealt with. The latest, Biden did not individually approve blanket pardons done with the auto pen. As I indicated in a previous Saving America, the Biden competency cover-up is the largest scandal in the U.S. government in 50 years. We are still picking around the edges. More recently, Biden doctor Kevin O'Connor took the Fifth Amendment when called before a congressional committee to explain about the president's mental status. He also allegedly covered up Biden's advanced prostate cancer. Generally, only guilty people take the Fifth, although, speaking as an attorney, for legal purposes, it cannot be viewed as an admission of guilt. Stacked on top of this, Joe Biden's so-called work husband, Anthony Bernal, also took the Fifth the next day. This nails the fraud being perpetrated on the American people, in my humble opinion. The committee will be interviewing others who were close to the center of the Biden White House. I am not sure what it will take to get the real goods. I call for immediate prosecution and long prison sentences for each and every fraudster that participated in this massive scam on the American people. Of course, Biden, despite his dilapidated mental status, is a key witness. In just the last week, he publicly admitted that he did not go through the pardons individual by individual before the auto pen was used. This is based on a report from the leftist New York Times. New information from various sources is now saying that the auto pen operator did not get instructions directly from Biden. It would seem that this disclosure alone would further document the scandal. Some of the convicts that Biden pardoned committed unthinkable crimes and should not be allowed near the rest of the American population. There are also the questionable political pardons, of course. I've taken the position that the presidential pardon power should not be unlimited. I would require Senate approval for each pardon in the future. This would at least provide a potential control valve for the people. I note that this is a bipartisan commentary, as I believe presidents of both parties have abused the presidential pardon privilege over the last 30 years. Reports on the economy are up and down. While a new Wall Street Journal poll of so-called experts are now saying there will not be a recession, they're not giving it a clean bill of health either. In the big picture, consumers are still spending, but the spending is a bit more restrained. Employment reports are fair. As I mentioned last week, the recent jobs report is not that big a deal since manufacturing jobs went down and public employment at state and local operations went way up. The threatened tariffs, with many in effect for months now, are producing income for the Fed, but without the increase in inflation predicted. However, the most recent inflation number is up 0.3% to 2.7%, so not a good trend. Remember, the target's 2%. The wholesale pricing is level, so that's a good note. Trump continues to call out Powell at the Fed for not lowering the Fed rate, but a conservative approach is for the Fed to watch the trend for a few more months before deciding on a drop in the rate. Trump also continues to call for Powell to resign, which I doubt will happen before the end of his term in May of 2026. An interesting number is the gross domestic product, or GDP, which grew 1% over year in the fourth quarter, increasing from the April forecast of just 0.8%. However, it's important to note that with the recent passage of the big tax bill, the politicians are calling for a GDP growth of 2.5% to avoid a huge increase in the national debt. The economists predict more like an annual rate of 1.9%. Well below that. Hey, folks, in financing a car loan or a house loan, maybe 0.6% doesn't make a big difference. When you are dealing with trillions and trillions of dollars, we're talking about massive amounts of money. So it is important how well the economy does. Update on the Gaza plan. Unquestionably, one of the toughest issues on the world stage is resolving the long-running Gaza issue. I believe it is absolutely clear that there will not be a two-state solution. Anything that allows a self-governing operation there will become a Hamas stronghold again. After the horrors of October 7th, Israel and the U.S. are not going to allow that to happen. I credit reports from the Washington Free Beacon that provide some updates on the negotiations that are going on. A lot of the media is not covering this very well. Many recall that in early February, President Trump suggested the best path for Gaza would be to remove all the non-Hamas folks and turn Gaza into Riviera-type flashy development. Most laughed at the idea. In any event, no real development can happen in the ruin that was Gaza until most of the people are relocated. You just can't do a massive cleanup given the current circumstances. It's unfortunate. It's not humanitarian. Basically, it's terrible. The rub is that the neighboring countries have steadfastly resisted taking any of the roughly 2 million Gazans. Early talks are now being revealed with several countries, Sudan, Somalia, and Somaliland, about accepting the Gazans. A note includes that Somalia and Somaliland denied that any outreach occurred. I suspect that to do this, many dollars will need to be provided for resettlement and continued support. Not sure where those dollars would come from. In the meantime, slow progress is reported on the ceasefire negotiations between Hamas and Israel taking place in Doha. This is an effort to create a hostage release deal without Israel agreeing to accept the current situation. The status is unsettled as Hamas reps accuse Israel of bad faith, but the U.S. claims negotiations are continuing. Hamas obviously wants a deal that allows them to continue to exist. In other words, a permanent ceasefire with them remaining in control of parts of Gaza. I do not see that ever happening after October 7th. Is Mamdani win in the New York City primary the result of huge numbers of illegals voting? While many are scratching their heads over the surprise win of a dirty commie, in my opinion, in the New York City Dem primary, I'm simply not surprised. How did that happen? Well, trace it back to the Dems' motor voter law from the 1993 Clinton administration, meaning if a person gets a driver's license, they can easily register to vote. But if they're not checking the citizenship for the driver's license, how can the state verify that the person is legally eligible to vote? Well, they can't, or up to now, certain states like New York and California just don't care. I believe this is called the law of unintended consequences. Hey, it's all fun and games until somebody gets hurt, right? It's too late for the New York City primary election, but states could implement a retroactive measure to require re-registration to vote by showing citizenship for their next voter registration. I also favor massive penalties, well promoted, of course, for voting if you are a non-citizen. New York also introduced in 2021 an insane law that requires various state agencies to automatically register people to vote. Well, then you have most likely non-citizens voting for the anti-American like Mamdani. Violence against ICE agents calls for harsher enforcement actions. In what sounds like third world dangers, ICE agents and other federal officers assisting in immigration enforcement have been targeted in 2 ambushes that took place in Texas recently. The Department of Justice listed 10 individuals charged in relation to the first incident when the suspects opened fire on correctional officers outside the Prairie Land Detention Center in Alvarado, Texas on the 4th of July. Sadly, one officer was shot in the neck, but fortunately will survive. The attack started with fireworks being shot at the facility. When the officers responded, apparently shots were fired. In addition, there was vandalism of official vehicles. A second incident was a man was killed after reportedly opening fire at a U.S. Border Patrol facility in McAllen, Texas, which is near the Mexican border. Ryan Luis Moscada, 27, was fatally shot after federal agents returned fire. He reportedly had an assault rifle and was carrying a utility vest at the time of the incident. Texas is openly supporting ISIS efforts, so these attacks in the state are especially notable. Enough is enough. Some really bad people are being detained by ICE and removed from our society. Anyone encouraging any interference with their efforts, politicians or civilians, must be dealt with harshly and quickly at the federal level. I want to call out scumball Massachusetts Federal District Court Judge Brian Murphy, who deliberately ignored a ruling by SCOTUS. The situation is that SCOTUS blocked an April ruling by Murphy in the case Department of Homeland Security versus DVD that prevented ICE from deporting illegals to a third country. Within hours, Murphy the clown, pretending to be a judge, issued an order stating that his related ruling enforcing the injunction remains in full force and effect, notwithstanding today's stay of the preliminary injunction. So the Department of Justice was back at SCOTUS with a petition that states Murphy's action was an unprecedented defiance of this court's authority. It further called his action a lawless act of defiance that once again disrupts sensitive diplomatic relations and slams the brakes on the executive's lawful efforts to effectuate third country removals. So SCOTUS held that Murphy is bound by the prior order and cannot enforce an injunction that our state rendered unenforceable. I call on Congress to initiate his impeachment as a judge immediately. Senate voted to end federal funding for Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This is a bit sad for me since I got my real start in media at the UPenn public nonprofit FM radio station. That station was not receiving federal support. However, I then spent over 2 years on the PBS radio station in Philly, WHYY-FM. And I recall as a child watching Julia Child on Boston's public TV station, WGBH, as the French chef. Many have raised their kids with Sesame Street, and of course, the British mystery shows that occupy some great evening programming. However, this is part of a $1.1 billion in federal funding over the next 2 years for that operation. America is broke and time to cut optional costs. Further, there are some additional factors. The news program has been consistently far left for years. I view that as anti-American. A publicly funded media source can be nonpartisan, but it cannot be hard left. Further, PBS has been running ads for years. I thought the idea of public funding would be that there would be no ads. There is also hour after hour of fundraising and subscription solicitations. Therefore, I do believe that it is the right time to withdraw that federal funding.
All rise.
And our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Saving America welcomes Ken Peterson. He has more than 30 years of experience developing and implementing enterprise risk management and human resource consulting solutions. Peterson founded Churchill and Harriman C&H in 1986. Since 1997, C&H has developed and implemented enterprise risk management and third-party risk management solutions for large enterprises. C&H helps clients select and implement controls, processes, and tools that identify, measure, and manage enterprise risk. Under Peterson's leadership, C&H advises clients on enterprise risk strategy in healthcare and financial services, as well as helping government agencies improve critical infrastructure. C&H also serves Fortune 100 clients in healthcare, defense, entertainment, finance, insurance, life sciences, manufacturing, mobile commerce, technology, and transportation. C&H is an assessment firm member of the Shared Assessments Program. Peterson is an active leader in the international standards community. C&H earned the distinction of being the first approved ISO 27001 and ISO 22301 associate consultancy by a leading global registrar. We welcome Ken Peterson for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you, Dave.
Just like I said, sometimes I have to cut these bios a little bit so we'll have time to ask some questions and all that. But what a great background, and it's our pleasure to have you here. Our first, as you know, we ask our guests 3 questions. Explain to our audience why firms need to identify, measure, and manage enterprise cybersecurity risk.
Well, there are a number of very formal reasons in answering that question, Dave. Number one, industry and government require that firms identify, measure, and manage their risks now. It's simply a matter of the depth and breadth that an individual industry or a public entity has to do so. And increasingly, organizations at the board level are required through public filings and through their investor relations functions to produce the outputs of the identification, the mitigation, and the listing of those formal risks when they go through these annual processes. So there's a very formal reason for doing so. Another reason for doing so, Dave, is that particularly at a time like this when budgets are tighter, is that you want to prioritize those risks so that if you only have a certain budget to attack these risks in a given year, you want to attack them from what we have identified as your chief risk, and then work your way down that list as far as you can.
Wow, so it's certainly something we hear so much about cybersecurity today, and so many different aspects to it. And our second question: what are the biggest cybersecurity risks that you see for your clients as we charge through the 2020s?
I think right now, Dave, we're in an interesting time for two chief reasons. Number one is the increased use of artificial intelligence, depending upon the organization, whether they're a commercial enterprise or a public enterprise, such as a federal or a state agency. Everyone is looking to leverage artificial intelligence. And again, depending upon the industry that you're in, or whether you're a federal agency or a state agency or a local agency, there's going to be rules and regulations that you have to adhere to formally if you choose to use artificial intelligence. So that's the primary reason. Another reason for this, Dave, is that because we've practiced now at an international level with the most discreet clientele in the world in financial services, healthcare, other industries, and for public entities, every great once in a while, the stars get aligned and there's a confluence of burgeoning compliance requirements that are put upon industry or are put upon a public entity at the federal, state, or local level. This is one of those times. So rather than work your way through these risk assessment criterias or these risk management frameworks, you need a formal advisory partner like we are to help you optimize your resources as you attack those, because each one of those is going to have a different standard of care and is going to have different requirements that are put upon you that you're going to have to adhere to in order to satisfy those individual requirements. So it's really twofold right now. So it's a particularly interesting time, Dave.
And now, just to clarify one point, you mentioned the significance of artificial intelligence. Does that make the job of cybersecurity more difficult? And if so, what's happening there?
It does, Dave. We have across industry and to some degree in public entities, as I've just referenced, elements of artificial intelligence has been used for more than a decade. Some of the viewers might be familiar with the phrase continuous monitoring. Well, in the cybersecurity world, continuous monitoring often utilizes elements of artificial intelligence and has for some time. Now we're at a point where in different elements of cybersecurity, whether it's a deepening of the use of AI in continuous monitoring or in other elements of cybersecurity, the use of artificial intelligence is on the rise. And so there are institutions that are already, and I know this because we are working with clients now that are in this category of critical infrastructure. Organizations are looking at frameworks such as the NIST artificial intelligence framework or the ISO International Standards Organization artificial intelligence standard, in order so that they can produce artifacts that are leveraged within their environment to produce artifacts that are then shared twofold, Dave, with their internal users, whether it be investor relations or compliance or their legal community, and simultaneously use with their external stakeholders, such as their customers, their prospect customers, or their regulators. So there's a huge opportunity to develop a proper strategy based on these accepted new burgeoning AI frameworks and standards that we can apply for a client to help them satisfy any such requirements. And we're doing that today.
Fascinating stuff. And our third question today is, CNH has an impressive list of clients in many major industries. For our younger consultants hoping to follow in your footsteps, what do you recommend as an approach? How do you get rolling, and what should they be doing?
Well, the work that we do in the risk assessment discipline, Dave, is normally categorized today under what's termed governance, risk, and compliance. You'll often see the acronym GRC. So if someone was interested in moving into risk assessments, they would normally find those opportunities listed in the public domain under GRC, right? And normally the way that either private industry or a state or local or federal agency executes risk assessments is as part of a team. So normally a junior person would work in a role that they're found to be comfortable with, and then once they prove that they can formally execute all those responsibilities, like in most other disciplines, Dave, you move up in the ranks and your responsibilities are expanded upon. So that's the typical path in. I will tell you that from my own experience, Dave, what attracted me to the risk assessment world, and I hope my enthusiasm comes across, is that there's a level of rigor and there's a level of execution and the dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's. You have to be very precise in this discipline to produce the requirements and the outputs that we do, that are depended on by organizations like the Department of Homeland Security, or a federal agency like Health and Human Services, or the EU. These are some of the organizations that depend on outputs that either we directly contribute to or we produce firsthand. That's what's exciting about this discipline, sir.
Fantastic. And Ken, obviously we just touched the tip of the iceberg here. How can our audience get more information about you and your firm?
Well, they can look up Churchill and Harriman. Our website is C for cat, H for Harry, U for United, S for states.com. There's a lot of information on our website, and we also, including elements of risk assessment. For example, we recently did a webinar for the automotive ISAC, which really gets into some deep risk assessments that we've done for private industry and for government. So I would point people directly either to social media or to our website, Dave.
Very great stuff. And again, we really appreciate your being here today.
Please proceed.
Something I strongly support is the end of DEI subsidies in the federal government. I don't know about you, but the numbers spent on this racist nonsense are stunning. A recent DOGE report was that the Education Department alone had at least $373 million in DEI grants. Keep in mind, I strongly support diversity, but is diversity based on merit, not discrimination in favor of this week's whack liberal causes. And it gets better, folks. A recent article by Tyler O'Neill in the Daily Signal, based on White House documents, includes a list of taxpayer abuse. Department of Defense, $2.3 million for virtual reality DEI Avatar for training at the Air University at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. How about $36,126 for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services for DEI training? And the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office paid $2.86 million for a public relations firm contract for the Council on Inclusive Innovation. Taxpayers being robbed by the U.S. Forest Service in the amount of $35,338 for Sri Lankan Climate Change Mitigation, Adaptation, and Resilience Coordinator Services. Folks, I have 3 graduate degrees. I'm not actually sure what that means, but I think it means taxpayers are being screwed out of $35,000. Then the U.S. Department of Labor paid $4.1 million for a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility consultation services and training for a Job Corps program. There's also been a lot of publicity regarding DOGE and the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, which has promoted DEI overseas in conjunction with whack charities under the wing of anti-American George Soros. The Daily Signal article mentions that taxpayer abuse reaches at least $4.2 billion in just one example. Some have especially criticized the attack on USAID due to the original concept of buying friends around the world by helping with health, food, and other related positive things. If USAID stayed with that objective, the current criticism would not be happening. How about this, folks? $1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia. $47,000 for a transgender opera in the country of Colombia. $20 million for an Arabic translation of Sesame Street. And of course, $2 million for promoting sex changes in Guatemala.
How does the defendant plead?
As we grew up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we are in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities. And the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. F grade for governors of Maine and Wisconsin. The badges of dishonor today belong to 2 governors who will hopefully soon disappear from political office forever. We have more on number 1, Maine Governor Janet Mills. During a recent governor's meeting in D.C. with Trump, she got into an argument with Trump about allowing boys and girls sports. Trump said Maine needs to comply with his executive order banning boys and girls sports. Mills said, "See you in court." Not wanting her to get the last word, Trump remarked that this was okay with him since time for Maine to have a better governor. Not to be outdone in the who can be dumber and more anti-American competition, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers spoke out against deportations of criminals here illegally. Previously, he vetoed a bill banning boys from girls' sports. Despite Evers' position, the Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association has just recently announced that it will comply with Trump's executive order preventing trans athletes from competing in girls' sports. So, Saving America awards today's F grades to Maine Governor Janet Mills and Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers for being out of touch with the American people.
Motion denied.
Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. U.S. Supreme Court rejects challenge to Alaska's campaign finance law. This is an interesting ruling by SCOTUS since it appears to run contrary to the High Court's ruling in 2010 in Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission, which blocked many campaign finance restrictions at that time. It allowed corporations and unions to spend unlimited funds on elections. That court found that such restrictions violated the First Amendment. We have just witnessed the results of that case in the extraordinary spending on the 2024 elections. In just a couple examples, the presidential race may have involved over $2 billion in campaign spending. The Texas Senate race, which was heavily financed by out-of-state interests, may have been the most expensive in history. A 2020 ballot measure in Alaska tightened Alaska's campaign finance laws after the state ceased restricting who could make independent expenditures supporting or opposing candidates following the Citizens United decision. The new Alaska law required anyone who contributes $2,000 or more annually to an organization making independent expenditures to support candidates in elections to, within 24 hours, report their donation or face a penalty of up to $1,000 per day. The measure also required political donors to report the true sources of their contributions, which in essence would mean that advocacy groups that derive funds from donations, dues, or gifts must disclose who provided their funding. It also required groups running television ads attempting to influence elections that receive most of their fundings from donors outside of Alaska must include a disclaimer in capital letters stating that fact for the ad's entire duration. Various activists sued in 2022, arguing that the law violated the First Amendment right to freely engage in core political speech, violated the rights of donors, and would coerce independent groups to air state-mandated messages. They lost at the district court, and then in a bit of a surprise, they also lost at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And now SCOTUS has just rejected their appeal. That means that the Alaska law will stand at its current situation. This is a very significant ruling and could lead to more state-level advertising and disclosure reforms.
Please raise your right hand.
Texas Medical Association, air ambulance. They say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. In 2021, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Labor Department, the Treasury Department released the requirements related to surprise billing, also known as the No Surprises Bill. This is designed to protect the majority of Americans who could face large, unexpected medical bills in odd situations. It restricts surprise billing for patients in job-based and individual health plans who get emergency care, non-emergency care from out-of-network providers at in-network facilities, and air ambulance services from out-of-network providers. Not surprisingly, the industry struck back with a federal lawsuit in Texas. Cases Texas Medical Association and Air Ambulance Services versus U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and those other departments. The key issues involve the calculation of the qualifying payment amount, QPA, deadlines for insurers to respond to provider bills, and disclosure requirements for insurers. The district court found that the Department of Health and Human Service rules conflicted with the Act's terms and were arbitrary and capricious. The defendant agencies appealed the decision regarding certain provisions, while the plaintiffs cross-appealed the court's upholding of the disclosure requirements. A few weeks ago, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issued an opinion in the case. The Fifth Circuit partially reversed the district court's action, which vacated certain provisions of the regulations and guidance under the No Surprises Act related to the methodology for calculating the qualified payment amount. It also affirmed the district court's vacator of certain deadline provisions and affirmed the district court's holding as continuing to require the advanced cost disclosures for patients by those providers. Many of us would agree that's an important disclosure. According to the feds, the departments are reviewing the Fifth Circuit decision and intend to issue further enforcement guidelines in the near future. So expect more updates on this as DAHS adjusts to the No Surprises Act rules to comply with this moving target.
Objection, Your Honor.
How about some quick hits? Such a breath of fresh air. I caught a quick press conference with articulate, straight-talking Caroline Leavitt, the new White House spokesperson. This is the best person I've seen in this slot in a long time.
Silence in the court.
A quick business note. Trump has announced that he ordered the U.S. Mint to stop making pennies. This is a move that is long overdue, although it does put a bow on the fact that we've experienced inflation for quite a while. Neighboring Canada stopped using pennies about a decade ago. In my last visit there, I found it was a perfectly reasonable move and there was really no inconvenience. Wonder if the Dems will soon block this as well.
May I remind you, you're still under oath.
The tech-heavy NASDAQ, as they say, crashed recently due to the announcement of China's new AI model, DeepSeek. Technology stocks, including NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Tesla, lost $1 trillion in market value on fears that DeepSeek, which is much cheaper, would be a serious competitor in the AI space. The fear behind this silly sell-off was that the Red Chinese might be ahead of the USA in AI. Given that Congress voted last year to ban TikTok due to spying by the Chi-Coms, why on earth would any company or university want to risk their valuable data with something called DeepSeek? That is, if it's even competitive with current AI models. It is far too soon to tell. Note that NVIDIA's powerful AI chips are not supposed to be sold to China. While China claims that it is not using the chips, I've heard on the street that most likely, with near zero security in the United States, they were probably using those chips to create whatever they created, not some cheaper chips developed by the Chi-Coms. By the way, in the interest of full disclosure, I do own stock in NVIDIA and Tesla.
I'll allow it.
Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. And I think after you hear this interview with John Gardner, you're going to agree with me that he's part of the interesting people. He's a self-taught entrepreneur after 2 decades of experience in American manufacturing. After traumatic injury as a teenager, he dropped out of high school and left Ohio to pursue his dreams in California. He slept in his car, ate canned food, and worked at restaurants. At the age of 25, he started a business out of his apartment based on cutting tools that his father had engineered. By overcoming adversity with determination and tenacity, he now sells his product to the U.S. Navy, NASA, Lockheed Martin, Ford Motor, the FAA, and thousands of other companies. His first book is Manufacture Local: How to Make America the Manufacturing Superpower of the World. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I think many other Americans. We welcome John Gardner for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thanks for having me on, Dr. Schein.
It is our pleasure. As you know, we ask our guests 3 questions, and so we'll get started. So many people drop out of high school, wander off to California and elsewhere. They often end up in misery or working at a fast food joint, and there's some songs along those lines, of course. How did you change that direction in your own life?
Well, I was working in restaurants, but I picked the highest end ones to work in, and I really just wanted independence. And I had left Ohio, Pittsburgh area to pursue acting because I was raised without a TV and a phone. And then I got hit by a car and had brain surgery, traumatic brain injury, and was in the hospital in a coma for a while. And when I woke up from the coma, I was able to watch movies. And I kind of grown up in the library a lot, but as I was in the hospital, I saw Dances with Wolves and Last of the Mohicans. And as a kid, I read a lot of frontier stories, and going west was always the kind of dream, you know, of the American manifest destiny type stuff. And so I got to see Superman for the first time. I was like, wow, I want to be in this industry and tell stories. And I, dropped out of school and went out to LA and was very fortunate to meet some good people and found I didn't really like the industry. I found it to be quite boring standing around on set. I loved the people, just didn't like the business of it. And so I didn't know what to do next. And here I am without I kind of remembered that my dad had started a business out of his garage when I was a kid, 9, 10, and 11. And I worked in the garage on a World War II era grinding machine. And I think it really was my dad's example of, hey, you can just start selling a product. As long as you have a product to sell, you can start something in your garage. And I think we all look at business now, not we all look at business, but I think we look at big institutions as I can't ever penetrate that, or I can't ever do that unless I go up the corporate pathway. But my dad was a good example of just doing your own thing. He's an inventor by nature. So I think it was truly my dad's example of entrepreneurialism that planted the seed for me that made me even think that was possible. He shut that down, and he liked having 40 hours a week and a steady paycheck and health insurance. And he liked kind of the safety of that. He's more of an inventor. So he shut that down. I was mad at him as a kid because I was making good money working for him. But I believe that the answer is what really started me on that. What saved me was really my dad's example. And then also his ability to create products. because of his engineering experience and make those products. And his example of watching him is really probably what, helped me be able to afford having a family in Southern California.
Just an amazing story. So your new book specifically addresses offshoring, as it is called. Instead of focusing on the positives, you describe some of the real downsides. Please share some of them with our audience.
Well, they're across the board. No nation has independence if it doesn't make its own products, and it's reliant on its foreign adversaries for its basic goods. 90% of our medicine comes from overseas, and a lot of it is tainted and poisoning us. But we talk about the environmental aspect. You're shipping 7,000 miles on cargo ships, which burn raw crude oil. America has some of the cleanest environmental laws in the planet. So making stuff here is just cleaner for our country. But also national security. A significant portion of our goods for our defense industrial base are made overseas by our strategic adversaries. So that's just some of the common sense items, some that people already talk about. But the things that I've learned or noticed from my experience in the industry that isn't talked about is the human capital, the know-how. Just because you can have a drawing of something and engineer it well does not mean you know how the process is to make it. I recently automated a machine shop I have and have lights out manufacturing, meaning it runs overnight while nobody's there, unattended. And the hurdles to that are immense. You always learn stuff in any new process. This was kind of proven by, I think it was the Undersecretary of Defense was talking about the Navy stopped making torpedoes for 20 years, from 1996 to 2016. And it took them, I believe it took them 2 years just to figure out how to make them again, because it was all new equipment, all new machines, all new personnel. Nobody knew how to make them again, even though they had the drawing. And I think it really showed, World War II was fought and won in 4 years. And it took 2 years just to learn how to make torpedoes again. So also, World War II was fought and won. We supplied our allies with massive amounts of manufactured goods. The Soviet Union, we supplied. The UK, we supplied with Liberty ships going up in the Arctic Sea. That was all done because we had civil manufacturing might that could be turned to military manufacturing in time of need. Right now, we don't have civil manufacturing might that can be turned. We do. It's just not as strong as it should be when we're relying on our foreign adversaries. So I think national security is the no-brainer, but also the human capital and how much time it takes to learn how to do something again is the most untalked about thing that is lost when we offshore as much as we have.
Incredible. And so our third question is, okay, you've described the problem. I'm a true believer. I agree with what you're saying. What are some of the keys to getting manufacturing moving forward again in the United States? What do we need to do?
Well, we need to put American companies on a level playing field with foreign companies. And the number one way to do that historically, since the Babylonian Code of Hammurabi, is tariffs have been in use since then in recorded history. And I have a chapter in my book that says tariff is not a four-letter word, because when I first heard tariff back in, I was like, oh, aren't those bad? We've just been brainwashed to have a knee-jerk reaction that they're bad. But America funded itself with tariffs for 140 years. Income tax did not exist. Sales tax did not exist until the 20s and 30s. America funded itself solely through tariffs for 140 years, and during that time, we were able to build up our industries behind this protective wall that even the playing field between our nation and other nations. And we bought too hard into the unilateral free trade theory, meaning if you tariff us at 200%, we're still only going to tariff you at an average of 3.4%, which is our average tariff rate right now, which doesn't make much sense to me. Another way tariffs help American manufacturers is to drive large volume jobs back, and so that companies can take advantage of the most beautiful thing in the world, even more beautiful than compounding interest, in my opinion, which is economy of scale. Any manufacturer knows that when you make 5 parts, it's much more expensive than if you make 5,000 parts per part. And the reason why is all the programming, all the tooling, all the machines, all the training that you have to do for 5 parts, you can then spread that cost out over 5,000 parts. But because of cheap labor, slave labor, lax environmental laws overseas, large lot jobs, large volume jobs tend to be pushed overseas. But if we bring those large volume lots here, then the price of American-made goods will go down because they have larger volume and can spread that cost out. Americans need to be put on the same playing field. You also hear a lot of economists say, oh, American manufacturing needs to be automated. It needs to have robotic cells. Well, no manufacturer invest in robotics or automation unless they have a large volume, because you keep things. Robotics and automation and lights out manufacturing is for large volume jobs, so you only do make that investment if you have the volume up front, and tariffs help drive the volume back here. So I could go on about this for a long time, but I don't know how much more time we have. So, I think, one recent way that, is tangentially related to the problems American producers face is I saw this thing about hazelnuts, organic hazelnuts. And this organic hazelnut American farmer was trying to get the organic certification. He found Turkish hazelnuts were being labeled organically, and he tracked down these companies overseas. They went to blind trusts. Nobody knew if these hazelnuts were actually organic. Now, 100% of American companies that claim organic are audited by the FDA. Only 2% of foreign companies that claim organic are audited by the FDA. And so they can claim it, and it's never proven, and they can undercut American pricing because they don't have to follow the same standards that American manufacturers or producers and agricultural producers, in this case, have to follow. And I think having fair trade and tariffs are the leveling field for that. So those are just some of the things that the big dynamics I think can really kick things off for American manufacturers.
John Gardner, love talking with you. And again, we want to mention your new book, Manufacture Local, How to Make America the Manufacturing Superpower of the World. And there it is. Oh, in large format. Okay. And great thoughts, and certainly something that is being talked about a lot. We had a lot of interruptions with COVID, and because a lot of things were made overseas where some factories were totally
shut down. Now the port strike, who knows what's going to happen with that?
Absolutely. So it looks like a lot of your topics are going to become, if they weren't already front of mind, are going to become even more front of mind over the next few weeks. So we're delighted to have you. And so tell our audience, how can they get more information about you and your book?
Well, you can find my book on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles or bookshop.org. Just Google Manufacture Local, John Gardner, it'll come up. And my email is John, JOHNG, author, AUTHOR, at gmail.com. John G. Author at gmail.com. And thanks so much for having me on, Dr. Schein. It's such a pleasure meeting you and talking to you.
And it is our pleasure.
The defense rests, Your Honor.
In an announcement that will surprise absolutely nobody, except maybe Joe the Demented, the CIA now favors the lab leak theory on the origins of COVID-19. John Ratcliffe, the new director of the CIA, has declassified the latest announcement for public release. So the CIA has now joined the FBI and the Energy Department in identifying a laboratory mishap in Wuhan, China, as the probable source of the COVID virus. This tragedy has killed more than 1.2 million Americans and over 7 million people worldwide. The saddest part of the story is that the gain of function research that led to the development of this virus in Wuhan was likely partially funded by the U.S. government. I note that more and more is becoming public about Anthony Fauci and his actions, this back in 2014. Note that these actions were always against federal policy. This is the reason Biden pardoned him on the way out the door. I'm glad to see that Trump recently struck the $400,000 a year being spent by the feds for bodyguards for Fauci. He can afford to pay for his own. And by the way, Trump also struck bodyguards for General Milley, and they're saying right now that Milley may get busted from a 4-star down to a 3-star. Interesting stuff, folks.
Order in the court.
In more good news for the business community, a Baltimore court dumped a climate change case against 26 oil companies. This stupid case was filed by the city of Baltimore, claiming that the major oil companies did not do enough to control the impact on the environment of their energy products. Sadly, this case has been pending, get this, since 2018. The court ultimately held, and I quote, "The Constitution's federal structure does not allow the application of state law to claims like those presented by Baltimore." So that's, like I said, some good news, but it should have taken far less time than 6 years.
Sustained.
Billions in unemployment benefits have been stolen. Work and Welfare Chairman LaHood's opening statement. Here's some quotes. All told, for the unemployment insurance program alone, GAO has estimated between $100 and $135 billion, billion with a B, was lost to fraud during the pandemic. That number is astounding from my standpoint. Even more concerning, the Department of Labor tells us that only $5 billion has been recovered. Meanwhile, we know law enforcement agencies have thousands of cases pending. The Department of Justice has charged more than 600 criminal unemployment cases associated with losses of over $300 million, a mere drop in the bucket so far. As of January 28th of this year, Department of Justice reports that more than 1,600 criminal matters remain open and as yet to be charged. Apparently, the statute of limitations is only 5 years, and that will soon expire. Chairman LaHood has asked for a 5-year extension to go after these thieves. I want to know why the thievery took place at all. This is underscoring the importance of examining what the government does and what these bureaucrats are doing. It sounds like they're throwing our money away. Keep in mind, the Biden Justice Department was happy to engage in lawfare against Trump and his cronies, happy to chase parents protesting woke policies at school board meetings, and even chasing down old ladies who are protesting outside abortion clinics. Yes, these folks should get fired, and the people who justify receiving our tax dollars get involved and restore justice to the American taxpayers. This has to stop in terms of the waste, and we've got to start prosecuting those who take advantage of the system. And I call for long jail terms and maybe in some cases even my preferred remedy, the death penalty.
Objection, Your Honor.
I've got whiplash on this one. The U.S. Postal Service stopped accepting packages from China and Hong Kong, and then a day later said, yeah, we're going to put them back on the list without considering the economic implications. And the deal is that as part of the new tariffs on Chinese imports, Trump eliminated an exemption for small packages. This was known as the de minimis rule. The rule waives import duties for small packages valued at less than $800 shipped into the U.S. According to a helpful Newsmax article, the original idea was intended to exempt personal gifts and other items that Americans sent home from trips abroad. The problem is that it turned into a mess since it allowed foreign businesses to sell billions of dollars of small items in the U.S. without paying any duties. Our friends at CBP, Customs and Border Protection, are supposed to be keeping track of all of those parcels. According to the Newsmax article, the CBP reported over 1.36 billion de minimis packages for fiscal year 2024. In comparison, this is roughly a 10 times increase over 2015. This is a tough job to track all those packages, and some type of automated system will need to be used. And again, I do want us to start assessing those duties that come in for commercial purposes. It's only fair, folks. And again, part of the reason for tariffs is to protect U.S. producers. The booty is thousands of small parcels like DVDs, toys, and video games come in from sources around the world. Those are commercial sources, folks, and they should be paying duties.
This session is adjourned.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.